Now we will discuss planning skill sequences. So let us first understand what is planning. Let us understand what is planning. So basically, planning is the reasoning phase where a large language model acts as an architect. So planning is the reasoning phase where the large language model acts as an architect. So in agentic systems, planning is the cognitive bridge between a high level user request and the physical execution of code or tools. So in agentic AI systems, we have high level user requests and we have to accomplish the goals. We have to serve the high level user request. So there the planning plays the role of cognitive bridge. So planning is the cognitive bridge in agentic AI systems. Planning is the cognitive bridge which takes in the high level user request and transforms into executable workflow, physical execution, the code, the tools. So planning is about transforming the user request into the executable workflow. That is what planning is in agentic AI system. Planning is the cognitive bridge. Planning is the process of decomposing a complex what into a structured how. Because we start with the what, like user will tell, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is my query, or this is what I want to accomplish, this is what I'm looking for. So planning is about decomposing a complex what into a structured how. Planning is how to accomplish a goal, a structured how to accomplish the what which the user is seeking. So decomposing a complex what into a structured how is what the planning is in agentic AI systems. So instead of immediately generating a response, the agentic AI system it pauses to map out a sequence of actions, and that sequence of actions is what the planning is. So planning involves goal decomposition. Planning involves goal decomposition, breaking a vague objective into atomic manageable subtasks. That is what the goal decomposition is. For example, if the goal is organize my trip, now it is a vague goal, organize my trip. And goal decomposition, we will break it into subtasks. Like to organize your trip, we have to book flights, we have to find hotel, we have to create itinerary. So that is what the goal decomposition is. And planning involves sequencing, determining the dependencies. For instance, you cannot initiate refund before you identify order. So sequencing. So we have the subtask and now we will arrange them in an order. So that is what sequencing is. So in order to initiate refund, first we have to validate the order, identify the order. So that is what the sequencing is. So we know that in order to accomplish a big goal, I have to perform these subtasks, but in what order is what is sequencing is. So sequencing is the order. So planning is all about deciding which steps to take and in what order. So planning is about goal decomposition, like what subtask or what steps I should take and in what order. So in agentic AI systems, if I talk about planning, two things I have to take care of. Goal decomposition, like whatever the objective is, whatever the what is, I have to break it into task, subtask. So goal decomposition and also the sequencing, the order. So that is what the planning is in agentic AI systems. Now let us look at some planning strategies which we should consider while orchestrating planning strategies. So we can have static planning. So static planning is like the blueprint. So in static planning, the developer hard codes the sequence of steps. So the developer he hard code like fixed SOPs, like systemic operating procedures, fixed SOPs, hard coded sequence. That is what the static planning is. So the agent follows a fixed standard operating fixed standard operating procedures. So, for example, if the intent is password reset, so there is a SOP for that. Like to reset the password, follow step A, then step B, then step C. So that is what the static planning is. Hard-coded sequences. And how it works, every time a specific intent is detected, the agent follows the fixed standard operating procedure, fixed steps. So static planning, it is best for regulated industries. It is best for fixed workflows, fixed SOPs. It is best for regulated industries like the banking, the healthcare. It is best for predictable tasks, repetitive tasks where deviation is a risk. Now, what are the pros of static planning? High reliability, because we know that fixed workflow, so very high reliability and safety and easier to test. And what are the cons? It is brittle. It cannot handle uncertainty. It fails off script. If the user asks for something slightly off script, the agent may fail. So that is what the static planning is. So in planning strategies, we also have dynamic planning, which acts like the navigator. So in dynamic planning, the agent generates the plan at the runtime based on the specific nuances of the user's prompt and the current state of the environment. So in dynamic planning, the agent generates the plan at the runtime based on the context, the tools, the current environment, and the user's prompt. So how it works, the dynamic planning, the agent assesses the context. So the agent assesses the context. It looks at its available tools and builds a custom roadmap. It can replan midway. That is what the beauty of dynamic planning is. We can keep on reiterating, we can replan midway if a step fails or if the user changes their mind. So in dynamic planning, we can handle uncertainty. All of a sudden, let us suppose the user wanted a trip to London, and all of a sudden, the user changes his mind and is looking for a trip to Paris. So with dynamic planning, we can handle that kind of a change. We can replan midway because here there is no fixed SOP we are following. There is no hard coded sequence of steps. Rather, we are generating the plan at the runtime based on the context, based on the user prompt, based on the tools which are available to us. Let us suppose all of a sudden a third party tool it stop operating. Something wrong has happened to it. So with dynamic planning, we can handle those scenarios as well. So that is what the dynamic planning is. So dynamic planning, it is best for open-ended research. Dynamic planning is best for creative tasks and complex troubleshooting. So the pros of dynamic planning is very flexible, intelligent, and the drawback is high latency, higher latency. It takes more time to plan. It might hallucinate. So prone to hallucinated steps or infinite loops. So we can also have infinite loops if not properly bounded. So if dynamic planning is not properly bounded, it might it is prone to infinite loops or hallucinated steps. So that is the cons of dynamic planning. Now let us look at an example breakdown. So let us look at an example like how planning works. So orchestration layer, it is responsible for planning. So let us look at with an example how planning works in agent AI system. So we have an example like cancel my order and refund it. So this is the query from the user, and this query is like very vague because user is not at all telling which order. So just the user is giving a prompt, cancel my order and refund it. So in a dynamic scenario, the agent's internal logic might look like this. So the planning, dynamic planning we are discussing. So the agent, he will, it will first try to identify the order because cancel my order, it's very vague. So the user will try to identify the order. So the agent will call the get user orders function to find the most recent transaction, and then the agent will check the eligibility, whether that order is eligible for refund or not. So the agent will compare the purchase date against the refund policy database, and if it is eligible, then the agent will cancel the order. The agent will call, so if the order is eligible for refund, it will call the update order status API to cancelled. Then the agent will initiate refund. It will trigger the payment gateway API to return refunds. And finally, the agent will notify the user. So it will synthesize a final confirmation message for the user. So this is how a dynamic planning works like. So we had a task like cancel my order. So this is the what the user want. User wants to cancel the order and refund, get refund. And planning is the how, and how we will achieve that. So step by step. So goal decomposition and ordering. So in planning, two things are there: goal decomposition and sequencing, ordering. So we have step by step subtasks which should be followed in this order. Ordering is very important. If we don't follow the order, it will not work. So first we will identify the order, we'll check the eligibility, whether it is eligible for refund, and if it is eligible, we'll cancel the order, we'll initiate the refund, and we'll notify the user. So this is how the planning works. So the key idea of planning is from ambiguity to action, from vague intent to executable workflow. So from ambiguity to action is the key idea of planning. So planning is breaking the goal into actionable steps. That is what the planning is. So user, like the agent will be given a goal. It can be a vague goal, and breaking the goals into actionable steps. The goal decomposition is what the planning is. And goal decomposition and also ordering of these steps. That is also equally important. So breaking the goals into actionable steps and ordering them, and then executing it in a particular order. So that is what the planning is. So the core value of planning is it prevents action paralysis. It prevents action paralysis. By breaking the goals into actionable steps, the agent transforms a high level human desire into a series of discrete, low level technical instructions. So planning is about transforming the high level human desire into a series of discrete low level technical instructions, executable workflows. So that is what the planning is.